Welcome to our latest Wandering Walks of Wonder walking tour. Today we're headed to Webster Groves, Missouri. Webster Groves is a suburb of St. Louis. It's about 10 miles southwest of downtown St. Louis. This area, once known as the Dry Ridge to fur trappers and the Missouri, Osage, and Dakota indigenous peoples until 1802, was part of the Louisiana Territory that was transitioning from Spanish to French ownership in the early 19th century. Webster Groves actually grew the most and became a well-known suburb of the St. Louis area due to its location on the Pacific Railway line. In 1892, the developer of Webster's Park, or Webster Park, an early housing subdivision, marketed the community as the Queen of the Suburbs, offering excellent housing in a rural setting and a quick commute to downtown St. Louis. One of the more historic buildings across the street from us is the Gorlock Building. It was constructed in 1911. It had various different types of businesses in it. It began with the Gorlock Realty Company, and in the 1950s, it became a Woolworths and a Ben Franklin store. The Lockwood Building that we see here on our left was constructed in 1926. The beautiful terracotta tiles below the windows on the second floor really retain their original Art Deco style colors. John Berg, a Webster Groves contractor, built this fire company number 1, as the first firehouse in 1913. In 1912, Webster Groves became the first municipality in St. Louis County to have a paid fire department. Before that time, Webster Groves had a volunteer fire department made up of local merchants who could brag that they never lost a chimney or a foundation. The Webster Groves Real Estate Company, owned by Marshall W. Warren, built this building in 1923. It was the first year that Webster had a zoning ordinance that was passed. Brennan's Groceria, a self-service grocery store, occupied that corner store spot until 1938, and it sat vacant for a couple years during the Depression until Hans Lemke, the popular band instructor from the high school, opened an appliance store here in 1940. The Thistle Tea Room, that was once known for its fireplace and cozy atmosphere, occupied the 2 storefronts on the building's south end until the 1930s. Across the street from us is Straub's grocery store. William A. Straub was born in Kirkwood, Missouri, the oldest of 7 children. His father died when he was 14, and Straub dropped out of school to support his family. He founded the Straub Grocery Company in 1901 in the Bristol Building at the corner here of Gore and Lockwood Avenues. As the business grew, Straub expanded to this spot that we see here in 1926. In 1956, his son constructed the building, which was extensively remodeled in 2002. Later on, we'll see the Straub home as well as the original Straub grocery store. Take a look for that as we go through the walk. Bernard Tapman, August Jekyll, and Dr. Charles Matz founded the Reliable Life Insurance Company in 1912 in downtown St. Louis to provide accident and health insurance to African Americans whom other insurance companies refused to cover. The company moved to Webster Groves in 1947. Their current building was constructed in 1966 and is a copy of the Governor's Mansion in Williamsburg, Virginia. Set back deep in this street, the Eleanor Gislin House was constructed in 1902, and it features a low-pitched gable roof. It has a Greek Revival style as well as a Greek Temple style porch. The Bristol Primary School was built in 1955. This school building was one of the first projects of the world-renowned architectural firm of Helmuth, Obada, and Kasbaum, also known as HOK. The design received much attention as an exciting early example of modern school architecture and introduced the idea of a modern type campus in a neighborhood school. The Webster Groves School District was organized in 1868, and its first elementary classes were held in the chapel of the Congregational Church on Lockwood Avenue that we'll see here in just a bit. In 1869, Webster School was a two-story white frame building that was constructed right here where we see the current Bristol Elementary School. In 1916, the name was changed to the Bristol School after Dr. Bennett J. Bristol. The present Bristol School was built in 1920. Charles Bailey moved to St. Louis from New York in 1851. After serving as a Union soldier in the Civil War, he became a general agent for Travelers Life and Accident Insurance Company. This home, with its elegant Georgian facade, Palladian windows, and paneled front door, cost about $7,000 to construct in 1867. That was at a time when most houses cost about $1,000 to build. William Straub, owner of Straub's grocery store that we saw just a little bit ago, lived in this home and kept his horses and delivery wagons in a large barn behind this house at one time. When the barn burned to the ground, he replaced it with a 5-car garage for his delivery trucks. Straub's grocery store has had 3 locations in Webster's Grove during its 100-year history, all within a quarter mile of Straub's house. The Mary L. Charles house was built in 1886 and is a great example of a Tudor Queen-style home. Mary Charles was a school teacher and lived here with her sister Hattie, who was also a school teacher. Edward and Nancy Jackson came to St. Louis in 1856, and Jackson became a successful wool broker after serving in the home militia during the Civil War. His house originally had a widow's walk on the roof, a summer kitchen in the rear, and a greenhouse attached on the south side, as well as barns and several outbuildings. This home was constructed in 1868 and was originally of an Italianate design. The home itself was purchased by Raphael Kessler. Raphael Kessler was a reverend from Württemberg, Germany, who was the first pastor of the Webster Groves Presbyterian Church. In 1872, the Kesslers sold this home to Benjamin Lippincott, owner of a soda waters company. Lippincott built his own mansion on Lockwood Avenue in the 1880s. This home, the Frederick H. Gore House, was constructed in 1891 as a wedding gift to Frederick and Jenny Gore from Frederick's mother. Jenny was a daughter of Charles Simmons, who lived on Gray Avenue. When Frederick and Jenny grew old, they built and moved into the 1.5-story house that's right next door and gave this house to their daughter and son-in-law. As we walk along Gray Avenue, we're going to see 4 houses that are known as the Kate G. Thompson houses. These 4 houses were constructed for Kate G. Thompson. She was the daughter of John Philip Heffenstein and married N.D. Thompson, owner of the publishing firm of N.D. Thompson and Company, the largest publishing house west of New York City. The Thompsons lived in a huge frame mansion behind the stone wall at the northeast corner of Jefferson and Swan. They built these houses on Swan Avenue to attract other successful businessmen and their family to Webster's Grove. Charles and Emma Suburb lived on Lockwood Avenue and built these houses as investments to attract other successful businessmen to Webster Groves. Charles Suburb invented the ring binder notebook. This 1885 Queen Anne style home was once owned by Reverend P.H.K. McComb. McComb served as the pastor of the Webster Groves Presbyterian Church from 1877 until 1887. In 1890, John Gentiles, a native of Scotland, purchased this house. He was a partner in the Penny and Gentiles Dry Goods Company, a popular downtown department store. The family actually lived here in this home until the 1950s. How you doing? Hi, puppy. The Willard Guest House was constructed in 1922. H.J. Cross constructed this home out of distinctive Missouri red granite for attorney Willard Guest, who commuted to his offices in the downtown area at 3rd and Broadway. One of the more distinguished as well as unique houses here in Webster Groves and here along Oak Terrace is the William F. Aubert House. This home is of a Spanish colonial revival style not often seen in this part of the neighborhood. This home was built for William F. Aubert, secretary and treasurer of the Aubert Nestor Glass Company. Previously, this was the location of a beautiful white frame summer home built in 1857 for Captain John Swan, owner of some of the fastest riverboats on the Mississippi River. That home burned in 1910 and the Aubert home was built on its foundation. A small cottage on the property was moved to the corner of Elm and Cedar that we'll see here in we'll see here in just a bit, and that cabin was constructed in 1884. When the large Swan estate was subdivided, the wife of the developer persuaded her husband to spare the stately trees, and Oak Terrace curves around those trees today. On the corner of this property is a large post oak which is believed to be over 200 years old. We're now entering what was once called, or maybe still be called, the Alexander Russell subdivision that was laid out in 1887 and stretched from Elm to Maple and from Swan to Jackson Streets. This house was one of the first to be built in this subdivision. The home was built by James A. Powers in 1889, or 1888 actually. Powers was a salesman for F.W. Humphreys and Company. We're now taking a look at the C.C. Cushion House that was built in 1924. The Webster Groves Boy Scouts built a cabin on this site in 1911. The troop was founded as the company of the United Boys Brigade of America in 1908 and received its charter from the Boy Scouts of Canada before the Boy Scouts of America was established in 1910, making it one of the oldest Boy Scout troops in the United States. The Edlin Fielder House is another great example of an 1888 Queen Anne-style home. This is another one of the earliest homes in the Alexander Russell subdivision. Fiedler was a salesman for the William Barr Dry Goods Company. Mary Blackwell Stevenson purchased the home in 1914 and conducted her famous music school here. Gordon Jenkins, the Hollywood composer, was one of her pupils. This 1889 home was once the home of George B. Morton. George Morton was the editor of the Weekly Journal of Agriculture published by N.D. Thompson, builder of the homes in the 100 block of Swan Avenue. This house really features a textbook Queen Anne-style house with asymmetrical design, bay windows, irregular projections, as well as an open porch across the front. This 1907 Queen Anne home was owned by the Miles family. Lucinda Miles' husband, George W. Miles, owned the J.D.W. Miles Timber Company, which specialized in yellow pine. Right next door, across the street, is the Federal Holcamp House, or the Fred Holcamp House. Fred Holcamp and his three brothers owned a lumber company in Old Orchard, and Holcamp built several houses here in Webster Groves. His brother, Carl Holcamp, served as mayor of Webster Groves from 1919 to 1921. The home that we're seeing here, which is the Charles C. Salvatore House, was the first house to be built in the Alexander Russell subdivision. Charles Salvatore was a partner in the firm of Salvatore and Stewart, which operated two men's clothing stores in downtown St. Louis. Salvatore invested in real estate in St. Louis as well as in Florida, and when he died, he left half of his estate to the Salvation Army. The Justin Kendrick House was built in 1883 and is a great example of the stick-style Queen Anne-style home. This stick-style house with its irregular silhouette, exposed framing, and diagonal stickwork was a precursor to the Queen Anne style of architecture. Justin Kendrick was a partner in Kendrick and May. And he also was part of the Equitable Life Assurance Association of the United States. We're now seeing another Salvatore house. This is the home of Henry C. Salvatore. Henry was the brother of Charles, who lived at 206 South Elm that we saw just a few minutes ago. He had 11 children, making for large family gatherings with their cousins to the south. On the 4th of July, the fathers lit fireworks and helped the children launch small paper hot air balloons. This 1882 home was owned by William E. Plant. Plant was the son of William Marshall Plant, one of the first residents of Webster Groves and a founder of the Congregational Church. Plant built several Queen Anne houses in central Webster to attract successful business people to the city. He laid out the William E. Plant subdivision between Elm and Maple and between Cedar and Swan Streets. He built the 2 Queen Anne houses on the south side of Swan, just east of Maple. This smaller house that we see here, the blue one, was a cabin that was originally part of a servant's quarter that were one of the many outbuildings on the original Swan property. Captain John Swan sold his Webster property to William Groshen in the 1870s, but often came out to stay in the cabin during the summers. When Lucine Blackmere purchased the north half of the Swan property and laid out the Swan Place subdivision in 1884, he moved the small cabin here to the corner of Elm and Cedar. Clarence Appel lived in this house from 1920 through the 1950s and was the mayor of Webster Groves from 1945 to 1953. John O'Hara was a carpenter who built this house as an investment in 1905. The style is an American four-square type house, and it's typified by its symmetrical floor plan as well as the hip roof. Roy J. Harris Sr., a reporter for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, lived here in the 1940s and 1950s. Harris had won a Pulitzer Prize for a series of articles on corruption in Illinois. We're We're taking a look at the Joseph Tremblay House. Tremblay was a lawyer and president of the Webster Groves Building and Loan Association, the Webster Groves Trust Company, and the Tremblay Wilson Real Estate and Loan Company. He built several houses in this area, and in 1890 built this one for himself and his wife Cora. Mrs. Tremblay had tuberculosis and needed to sleep in the fresh air, so he swapped houses with Adolph Rozier, who owned a house with large sleeping porches, and moved to that house in the 1890s. This intersection here at the corner of Gore and Cedar Streets was called Technorville because Edwin Technor built 4 houses in this area, as well as 3 other houses right around this area. He lived on South Gore, where the Algonquin Apartments that across the street now stand. He was a familiar sight walking through Webster Groves with his Van Dyke beer, flowing cape, and cane. Technor raced to fires to salvage doors, mantels, and new posts for his new houses. On one occasion, the burning house was saved and Technor had to replace the doors. This small home was once home to Harriet Van Court. Harriet Van Court's husband died during the cholera epidemic of 1849, leaving Harriet with much property. She lived here with her daughter's family until she died in 1879. Her daughter and son-in-law, George Fletcher, a Confederate soldier, built this farmhouse in 1884. One of the many large churches here on Lockwood Avenue is the Webster Groves Presbyterian Church. Members of the Rock Hill Presbyterian Church who lived in Webster Groves organized the Webster Groves Presbyterian Church in 1866. The first building was constructed in that same year, or 1867, but burned in 1890, and they constructed this Gothic revival type church in 1891. Here on our right is the original W.A. Straub grocery store. This is site of was constructed in 1926 and features beautiful Federal Revival fan windows. William A. Straub founded that grocery business in 1901. The first Congregational Church was organized in 1866 and is one of the oldest churches in Webster Groves. Initially, the congregation met at a small chapel on Lockwood Street near Rock Hill Road. In 1870, they built a small limestone Gothic Revival church and then a much larger sanctuary in 1893. This beautiful colonial revival church was built in 1888 by Charles W. Ferguson. Ferguson was an executive with several lead companies. He and his daughter died in the swine flu epidemic of 1918, and his wife subsequently married Joseph Tremblay. In 1920, the Webster Groves YWCA purchased the house for use as a tea room, clubs, classes, and employment bureau for women. Financial problems forced them to sell the house. In 1923, it was purchased and used as a funeral home. The Southwestern Bell Telephone Building was constructed in 1916 as part of the Bell Telephone Company relay switching stations. Once there were operators here taking calls that would go from here all the way around the St. Louis area. Henry Schultz started his feed and grain business here in this building in 1893. Schultz had exceptionally large horses and wagons to carry grain, so he branched into moving and storage. The top floor of his building was a huge warehouse at one time to store furniture. Before helping to establish the Webster Groves Trust Company in 1901, Schultz kept money and important papers in his large safe for local merchants. Right across the street here is what was once the Brockman Blacksmith Shop. Charles Brockman established his buggy works and blacksmith shop here in 1892. He operated the blacksmith shop on the first floor, and his children watching from the doorway could smell the horses' hooves burn when the hot shoes were applied. During snow or ice storms, Brockman got up early to sharp shoe delivery wagon horses. Brockman also built buggies and wagons on the second floor. And across the street was once Preen's grocery store. Henry Preen came to Webster Groves from Germany with his brother John in 1857. In 1867, Henry Preen built a framed grocery store and residence at this location, and he and his wife raised 10 children here. That store burned in 1880 on the day Preen's daughter Carrie was born. And unfortunately, his insurance had lapsed just the day before, but friends and neighbors rallied behind him and helped build this brick building. Our final building on our tour is what was once the Missouri Pacific Railroad Station. This building was constructed in 1904. This Queen Anne-style station was constructed in 1904 and served the community all the way until 1961. I hope you've enjoyed this Wandering Walks of Wonder tour here in downtown historic Webster Groves, Missouri. If you're a resident of Webster Groves or the St. Louis area and have been here, leave a comment on one of the homes or one of the buildings that you find the most beautiful. Also, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and we will see you on our next Wandering Walks of Wonder Adventure. Take care now. Bye-bye.